My parents left me in a parking lot during a trip to cheer up my sister who failed school, but I wrote an essay about it and now my parents are in trouble with social services. My family is a little, how to say it, crazy. I think that's the right word. Because here I am, sitting in a quiet corner of the library with Wi-Fi and a laptop, trying to figure out just how unhinged my parents really are. For context, I'm 17 years old and in my senior year of high school. I've always been a good student. I like doing homework, reading, studying, those kinds of things. My parents love to joke that I was born with a calculator in one hand and a pencil in the other. My sister, who's 15, is the opposite. She's not failing academically, but she's more interested in sports, her friends, and TikTok than school, and usually gets by with C grades. This semester things changed. I worked harder than ever and finished at the top of my class with straight A's. My sister failed 2 core subjects, so she had to go to summer school. Naturally, I thought my parents would finally recognize my hard work. Maybe they'd take me out for a nice dinner or at least give me a pat on the back. But that's not what happened at all. Instead, they decided my sister needed a morale boost. Their solution? A 1-week vacation in a lakeside cabin, 3 hours away. That would have been fine, except they didn't invite me. To be clear, they left me behind on purpose. And here's the best part, they drove me to a halfway point, pulled into a random parking lot near a hiking trail, and told me to get out. My mom's exact words were that this would build character. She said it would help with one of my college essays. My dad chimed in with a grin, saying sleeping under the stars would be an adventure. My sister just sat in the back seat scrolling on her phone. I thought they were joking. I laughed and said, "Okay, funny joke, now let's go." But my mom just shoved my backpack, packed because I thought I was going with them, into my arms and said I'd thank her later. Then they drove off. I stood there in shock, in a parking lot by the woods, watching them leave. I had no food beyond a couple of granola bars, no money except $20 in my wallet, and no idea what to do. So I did what I always do, I solved the problem. I walked down the trail for a while until I found a clearing by the river. I unrolled my hoodie and used it as a pillow. I lay there staring at the sky, the stars cutting sharp lines into the black, and I thought, maybe this is the character building they were talking about. Maybe this is the essay. Here's the thing, I'd been stressed for months about the draft of my college essay. Every draft seemed to lack something interesting. And now, here I was, abandoned in the woods by my own parents. I wrote about resilience. I wrote about watching the car drive away and realizing I was alone. I wrote about how education has always been my anchor in a family that rewards stupidity, not hard work. I poured every drop of frustration into that draft. I didn't even think about polishing it, I just let it pour out. When I finished, I walked back to the parking lot and then walked 3 kilometers to the town. I bought a bus ticket home with that $20. I got back before they even texted me. Not that they did. Not once. There was no, "Hey, are you okay? Did a werewolf eat you?" Nothing. They came back from their vacation sunburned and relaxed, complaining about traffic. Meanwhile, I was at the kitchen table editing my essay. My mom glanced at me and said, "You survived, huh? That's the spirit." My dad laughed and said, "That's our little nerd." I just thought, more material for my essay. A week later, one of my teachers encouraged me to submit my essay to a local youth writing contest. I didn't think much of it, but I sent it in. And then everything went crazy. The essay won. Not just the contest, it was picked up by the local newspaper. They published it as a feature. Suddenly the whole town was talking. Teachers congratulated me. Neighbors called my parents asking if the story was true. My parents went ballistic. Cornered me in the kitchen, furious. My mom said I'd made them look like monsters, which, to be honest, is exactly what they were. But it was too late. The newspaper had published it. My name was on it. And the kicker? Someone called Child Protective Services after reading it. Not that that was my plan, but I also didn't think anything good would come from people finding out what they did. My parents, so yeah, in a way, my essay was revenge. Now there's an investigation. My parents are pacing around the house terrified, like the FBI is about to kick down the door. They won't, because the FBI doesn't do that. I looked it up. But my parents still have that fear in their eyes, like it could happen. At least it won't be me telling them. In the end, they were right. It did build character. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have written such a good essay. And now they wouldn't be getting karma from social services and from the whole town. Look who's building character now. Thanks for nothing, parents. Update 1. When I wrote the first post, my parents were pacing around like caged animals, waiting for Child Protective Services to show up. I was worried for my own safety. Nobody ever told me if they'd been vaccinated against rabies, but even with rabid animals I wasn't moving until I saw them face consequences for that trip. It was everything I expected and more. One day, it was a Thursday afternoon, my mom was in the kitchen obsessively scrubbing the counters, the way she does when she's nervous and doesn't know what else to do. Some people eat, my mom cleans. My dad was in his recliner watching TV in silence. My sister was scrolling TikTok. And then the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door. A woman stood there with a folder and a badge. She introduced herself calmly but firmly, saying she was there to follow up on a report about my safety. You could almost hear my mom's blood pressure spike. She jumped in with this high, sugary voice, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that I was fine, that everything was fine. The Child Protective Services worker said she still needed to talk to me privately. That made my parents even more nervous. My dad tried to argue, saying it wasn't necessary, but she cut him off with one line: "If you refuse, I can call the police and handle it with them." That shut him up. We sat down at the dining room table, just the worker and me. My dad started to pull up a chair, but the worker told him this would be between her and me, so he could go do something else. She asked me to explain what happened the day my parents left me. I didn't have to exaggerate it to make it sound bad, it already sounded awful. Just the facts: how they left me in a parking lot, told me to sleep under the stars, gave me almost no food or money, and then drove away. How I walked to the next town to buy a bus ticket home. She asked if I felt unsafe at home. I told her the truth: my parents don't hit me, but they don't protect me either. They undermine me, dismiss me, and think neglect is some twisted lesson in resilience. She wrote everything down, nodding slowly. Then she asked if I had anyone outside my home who supported me. For the first time, I felt the knot in my chest loosen, because yes, I did. Teachers, my school counselor, even my boss at the tutoring center where I work weekends. I gave her names, and she seemed relieved I had a support network. She left me her card and told me to call if I ever felt unsafe again. Then she went to talk to my parents. I don't know exactly what they said, but judging from the yelling and frantic gestures, it wasn't pretty. My mom insisted it was just a creative parenting technique. My dad argued I was never really in danger and that I was smart enough to take care of myself. At one point, I heard my mom snap that I was just exaggerating for attention, which only made the worker's tone even firmer. She stayed professional, but I caught a few lines: neglect is not an educational tool. It doesn't matter if he's smart, you are still responsible for his safety. When she finally left, my parents looked like they'd just slept under the stars. They told me I should have kept my mouth shut, but not much more. In the end, they didn't want me talking to the worker again. I told them technically I hadn't spoken, I'd written. And I tapped my head to remind them I'd done it with an essay. The next day, my English teacher asked to talk to me. She'd read the article in the newspaper and said she was proud of me. Then she told me she had forwarded my essay to a friend of hers who works as an admissions advisor at a local university. Apparently, they were impressed. She said I might get interest from schools beyond the ones I'd already applied to. It hadn't even been an option in my mind, but it couldn't hurt to have more choices if my other applications didn't work out. Later, in the cafeteria, a couple of classmates I'd barely talked to before came up to me and said they'd also read the piece. One of them said it resonated because his parents were similar to mine. Meanwhile, my parents started panicking even more. My mom ranted about neighbors whispering, my dad grumbled about coworkers making jokes. One night, my mom cornered me and said I had to write a follow-up essay clarifying that it was all dramatized. She wanted me to present it as creative writing. I told her no. She snapped her fingers and said I had to because she was my mother and I had to listen to her. I asked her if I should also listen to this, the social worker's number, because if so, maybe I should call right then. That shut her threats down instantly. My dad took a softer approach. He sat me down and said he knew I didn't want this to go so far, but if Child Protective Services kept investigating, it could ruin all of us. He suggested I just stay quiet and not poke the bear. I told him none of this was ruining me. So it wasn't necessary for him to speak for everyone. My boss at the tutoring center pulled me aside during my shift. She told me she'd also read the article, it was apparently making the rounds. She said if I ever needed a place to stay, I could use her guest room, and she also offered to write me a strong letter of recommendation. My mom tried to ground me, but I ignored her. I'm 17, applying to colleges, and working. She can't punish me like I'm 10. My dad has retreated into silence, nursing his pride with beers in the recliner. Yesterday, Child Protective Services called me directly. They wanted to check in on how I was doing and said they'd be making another visit soon. When I told my parents, my mom's face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour, probably her own lip. I still don't understand why no one else in this family, besides me, seems to be building character. It's practically the same exercise they tried on me. I don't get why my parents don't appreciate it. Sure, it's not the woods, but services look just as scary, if not scarier. Update 2. Child Protective Services came back, this time with 2 workers instead of 1. Double the karma, I guess. They separated us again, me at the dining table, my parents in the living room. The new worker, a man this time, asked sharper questions. What's a normal day like in your house? Who makes sure you eat? Do you feel like you can talk to your parents when something's wrong? I told him the truth. I won't repeat every detail here, but you can imagine what life with my parents is like if they're capable of doing what they did. Then he asked the big question, do you want to stay here? My answer was that I wanted stability until I could leave for college, whether that came from this house or somewhere else. I didn't say directly that I wanted to be taken out, because I'm so close to leaving anyway, but I also wasn't sure foster care would be the best option at this stage. Meanwhile, my parents were in the other room putting on their best performance of Concerned Parents. I could hear snippets, stuff like, OP's birthday is coming up soon, we need to prepare something big since it'll be the last one at home. Just more attempts to look good. At one point, my mom said loudly, like she was on a construction site shouting to her coworker, that they love my creativity in writing. That made the worker pause mid-pen stroke. After the visit, my parents announced we'd be having a family meeting. Translation, no birthday party, and they didn't love my writing, they wanted to get me back in line. They sat me down at the table and started damage control. My mom said she'd been thinking and maybe they'd miscalculated how their actions would be perceived. My dad added that people outside the family don't understand our dynamic and twist things. I sat with my arms crossed, listening. My mom asked me to call Child Protective Services and tell them I knew my parents loved me and that I'd never doubted it. My dad wrapped it up with the classic line, we're all just trying our best. I asked if they wanted me to call now or later, to tell CPS that my parents were trying to extort me. That was the end of the meeting. To give you an idea of how far my essay has spread, since this is a small town, even the cashier at the grocery store asked how I was doing. Parents at school pickup gave me sympathetic smiles. It was surreal. For me, it was validation. For my parents, pure humiliation. They started avoiding neighbors, social events, even skipping church because of the stares. One night, my mom stormed into my room and accused me of ruining her social life. She said her friends didn't want to be around her anymore because I'd painted her as a bad mom. My sister finally broke her silence, cornering me in the hallway one night. She said she hadn't asked for any of this, that she hated I'd written the essay, and that now everyone saw her as the spoiled one. I had no response for that. She is the spoiled one, just in the worst way. This wasn't about a bigger birthday party or extra privileges. It was literally abandoning their other child to save $50 a night at the cabin. Apparently, my parents figured out it would be $50 more per night if they brought 2 kids instead of 1. So they told me to figure out my own way back home. My school counselor called me in after class for a meeting. She said if things at home got worse, she could reconnect me with resources. And then last weekend, Child Protective Services showed up again. But this time, while my parents were arguing, the caseworker walked in right as my mom was yelling about something or other. She wasn't going to wait for them to finish to ring the doorbell, that would ruin the surprise part of a surprise follow-up visit. My dad told her to calm down when he saw the worker enter. It was chaos. The caseworker didn't even blink. She simply asked me to pack a bag and said I'd be going with her that night. It was just a temporary placement to give everyone space. I grabbed my backpack and left. That night, I stayed with a foster family 2 towns over. Luckily, they were kind, normal, and calm. I sat at their table eating spaghetti and realized, this is what a home is supposed to feel like. The next day, my parents called me. They accused me of playing the victim to get pity. My mom was furious at Child Protective Services, saying they had no right to take me, while my dad muttered about government overreach, saying, in his words, they like to steal kids. I had another meeting with my parents and CPS, this time with 2 workers again, a case manager and a uniformed officer. The purpose was to sit everyone down and make things clear. We all sat in the living room. The case manager began by outlining what they'd observed so far: neglect, emotional abuse, unstable environment. My mom openly admitted that the parking lot night was unacceptable, that leaving a minor like that wasn't teaching resilience, it was abandonment. My mom shot back loudly, insisting everything was being blown out of proportion. She called my essay creative exaggeration. The officer shut that down quickly, saying it wasn't exaggeration when they had my testimony, the bus ticket receipts I bought, and corroboration from people who saw me there after being left behind. That's when my dad tried to soften things, talking about cultural misunderstandings and different parenting styles. The caseworker leaned forward and said, "I've heard too many neglectful parents to let you spin me that story." If my dad were a cartoon, he would have deflated like a balloon right there. The caseworker turned to me and asked if I wanted to stay there or if I preferred they find me a different placement until I turned 18. I answered, I'd rather be somewhere else. My mom lost it. She stood up, pacing, ranting that I'd humiliated her, ruined her reputation, ruined her life. She called me ungrateful, selfish, and dramatic, right in front of CPS. The officer stepped between us, telling her to sit down because he was authorized to use force. My dad tugged at her arm, whispering for her to stop, which only made her whirl around and slap him, because, according to her, he wasn't doing anything to help. Pure chaos. Then my sister started crying, not for me, but for herself. She blurted out that she was sick of being compared to me, that she hated being the failure, and that she never asked to be dragged into this. My mom tried to console her, saying we had to stick together as a family, but my sister pushed her away and screamed that sticking together is what got us here in the first place. It was the first time I'd seen my sister say anything about all of this, and I think she picked the absolute worst moment for my parents, because she said it right in front of those people. CPS took me back to the foster home. After we left, things at my parents' house blew up, I know because my sister told me. My mom turned on my dad, screaming that he hadn't defended her. Then she turned on my sister, accusing her of betraying the family, saying she'd never expected that from her. Meanwhile, my parents' social circle shrank even more. My mom's best friend told her she couldn't keep being her friend. My dad's co-workers mocked him about CPS, and he came home angrier than ever. My sister says they're going crazy, even aggressive, but at least not toward her. CPS is monitoring her situation too, so it's not like they can lay a hand on her now. But they slam doors, punch walls, and scream at each other constantly. I told her to record as much as she could on video or audio, and that if she ever felt scared, she could call 911, or me. Update 3. I never thought I'd be writing so much about one night in a parking lot, but here we are. The dust has settled, and I need to start looking forward instead of back. 2 weeks after my last post, CPS returned to my parents' house with official papers. The caseworker explained that after reviewing everything, they decided the house was not a safe or stable environment. The papers were for a temporary guardianship. I'd be living with a foster family until I turned 18, unless I preferred to stay with a family friend. That made my move permanent instead of just a few days. I think my parents assumed CPS was bluffing the whole time. They thought they'd get a slap on the wrist, a report written, and I'd be sent back. When they realized it was real, that I was legally leaving their custody, all hell broke loose. My mom screamed that they couldn't do this, that it was kidnapping, that I was using the system to hurt them. My dad stood up as if he was going to argue. But the officer reminded him that the court had already approved it, and wasting his breath wasn't going to help. If he resisted, he'd be arrested, which would only bury their already buried case even deeper. So my mom screamed, and my dad sat down as usual. The truth is, I like living with this foster family. They're an older couple a few towns over, but they're so kind and good to me. They take more interest in my life than my own parents ever did. Their house smells like cinnamon, they have 2 lazy dogs, and they keep a plate of cookies on the counter. That's where the cinnamon smell comes from. Probably not great for my stomach. I don't want to show up to college with a beer belly before I've even tried a beer. But at least here I feel safe and cared for, more than I ever did at home. People like my boss at the tutoring center have also helped in every way they can, giving me extra support here and there so this transition doesn't affect my college applications as much. I don't think I'll ever stop being grateful for that. The local newspaper published a follow-up article. And just to be clear, stop asking me for the link. I don't want people finding out who I really am. This time, it wasn't just about my essay. It was an investigative piece on parental neglect, with photos of my parents that didn't exactly flatter them. They've become the talk of the town. Because of all this, my dad started missing work, calling in sick more than usual. My mom barely leaves the house unless it's for essentials. My sister would tell me bits and pieces. I guess that was her way of trying to reconnect with me. She even started spending more nights at friends' houses than at home. I heard from others that CPS permanently flagged their file. They'll be monitored for years, especially because my sister is still a minor. My mom blames me for bringing the government into our lives. I blame her for leaving me in a parking lot. I'd say that's a fair tie. Surprisingly, my sister and I have started talking more since I left. We've been messaging, and she admitted she hates the pressure they put on her. We're not suddenly best friends, but for the first time it feels like we're allies instead of rivals. The last time I saw my mom was brutal. She came to a CPS meeting and tried to defend herself. She said I twisted everything, that I was a manipulative storyteller, and that nothing I said was true, that I was just a spoiled brat lying to make myself look good. Well, if I'm a spoiled brat, who do we blame for raising me? None of it worked. My sister's case is still under investigation, though nothing as concrete as being abandoned in the middle of nowhere, so they haven't pulled her out yet. As for me, I've gotten some college acceptances. I'm starting the process of deciding where I'll go next year. I have partial scholarships, but I'll still need loans and work study to cover it. But honestly, compared to living with my parents, that feels like a vacation. Update 4. I'm back after a while, now that I've settled into the university I chose. It wasn't my first choice, but it was the one that gave me the biggest scholarship, so it'll let me study without drowning in debt. Not bad, just not the one I would have picked if money hadn't been a problem. Which, let's be honest, with my parents it always would have been, whether they abandoned me or not. I feel a little guilty about leaving my foster parents. In just a few months, I felt more attached to them than I ever did to my actual parents in my whole life. Honestly, if that night when they left me behind I'd been found by a werewolf, I'd probably feel more attached to him than to my real parents. Either way, I still keep in touch with my foster parents. I promise to come back for the holidays, maybe visit on a weekend when I can figure out what I'm even doing here. Everything's new right now, and I'm just adjusting to this new life, work, classes, study sessions. I'm figuring it out as I go. My parents, meanwhile, are figuring out how to be parents without kids. They're still bad at it, even with no kids around. My sister was removed from their care. She's living with my foster parents now, on my recommendation, until I can find a way to bring her with me. She can't live in my dorms, and an apartment is too expensive for now, but I'll make it work somehow. As for what exactly happened to make CPS take her away, it's pretty on brand for them. My parents wanted her to write an essay saying what great parents they were, something to rival mine. Not to brag, but I'm the nerd, not her, if you remember. She refused to write it. They wanted her to talk about all the good things they'd done over the years, to lie. Sure, maybe they treated her better than me, but not by much. I don't know what they wanted, maybe something about rescuing her from the rubble of a collapsed building and saving a kitten at the same time. They needed a strong story to fix their image. She refused, and refused again, until they told her either you do it, or else. And she chose, or else. Which meant they locked her in her room for 3 days, not even allowed out to use the bathroom. By that point, the CPS investigation had slowed down because they hadn't found anything new. But my sister didn't wait 3 days. After about 6 hours, she tried to escape. She didn't call me when it happened because she didn't want to worry me, which is ridiculous. She absolutely should have called. She could have called her CPS contact, called 911, anything. For context, my sister's bedroom is upstairs, same as mine was. Our parents sleep downstairs, so around 10 p.m., she tried climbing down the roof outside her window. In the dark, she slipped, rolled, and fell right into the front yard. My parents didn't even notice, because their bedroom is in the back. But a neighbor saw what was happening and helped her. They also called 911. After she was treated and taken to the hospital, they confirmed that aside from some scrapes and the scare from the fall, she was okay. But CPS was informed, and since my parents already had a pretty thick file open thanks to me, you can guess the result. My sister was taken to the foster family, and I'm now trying to bring her to live with me. She's still attending the same school, because just like with me, they drive her every morning and pick her up every afternoon. That's the advantage of being older, having free time, and a huge heart. If she moves in with me, she'll have to transfer schools, but she's not against that idea. My parents are now facing charges because apparently locking a teenage girl in a room without access to a bathroom, maybe even food, is much worse than abandoning me near werewolves. Yes, those werewolves might be chill and might even invite you to play a basketball game on their makeshift court in the woods, but it's still bad. Even so, I plan to return to the city to give my testimony when the case goes to trial, because it will be taken into account. I didn't plan on writing so much, but I needed to share this, including the bit about the werewolves. Update 5. Since so many people have been asking in comments and private messages, let me answer the biggest one. No, my sister is not living with me. It's not because I didn't want her to, I was already making arrangements to get my own apartment and bring her with me. But she chose to stay with our foster parents. She's gotten attached to them, which doesn't surprise me. Leaving her friends and everyone behind would have been very hard. They agreed, they even insisted she stay with them. It gives me another excuse to visit them and her. My parents faced consequences for the charges of child neglect. They were fined about $12,000 and ordered to attend parenting classes. Even so, my sister had the option to decide whether to go back to live with them once they'd completed these requirements. But you already know what she said. Well, you don't know what she said, but you know the decision she made. She said she wouldn't go back to them even if they paid her. You know, cinnamon cookies have that kind of charm on people, you don't want to leave them. We know our parents moved, because the family house we all lived in was up for sale for a while, and then it was occupied by someone else. Nobody knows where they went, because they basically packed everything overnight and left. My mom won't have trouble finding another job in some other city, but my dad's work was tied to something in our town. I won't say what, it would be too easy to figure out which town this is. I wonder what he's working at now, though honestly, not enough to want to find out. Unless my parents are chosen as animals to be sent into space and it makes the news, I don't really care. I think this will be my last update.